Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Sorry, we're starting a little late. We had some minor technical difficulties. With me here is, my name is Sarah Skowinski. I'm the Adult Services Director at Portland Public Library. And with me here, you see Abraham Schechter. He's our archivist and historian. He's got a great presentation for you tonight. If you have questions during Abraham's talk, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the program. We'll also have about 15 minutes for live questions if you have any questions you want to ask. But with that, Abraham, if you want to take it away.
Welcome, and we'll try to make up for some lost time, and I will cut to the chase. But I'm really glad that you're all here. And do note that you're each welcome to visit the Portland Room in the Portland Public Library. Many of you have been here, I'm sure, but you're certainly always welcome. The focus of the department here is special collections and archives, and our specialization centers around the greater Portland area. When we say archival documentation, in this context, it is what we call the documental story of the life of the city. And that takes shape in printed and manuscript items, in periodicals and in maps and in images. And we're gonna work with some images this time. And this evening, we're going to all enjoy an exercise in observation. We're all together observers of this city. And rather than being a debate or a survey of prominent built structures, this is actually a sampling of many of the architectural styles that we see today. And the photographs that you'll see are all places you can go find today. You can go many directions when you do something like this, but I wanted to start with something about observation, about observing what is in front of us. What do we see? And as you know, a city like Portland is the sum of its eclectic parts. When I assembled these slides, taking most of the photos myself, my intention was to encourage you, all of you, to look further and to look closer. And think of when you're waiting at an intersection, assuming that your vehicle is stopped, right? And you're looking across the street and you're curious about what you see. What is the style? When might this have been built? Does it have a history? What does it remind me of? And so you're beginning this process of inquiry. And the idea here is to connect more with the city and its functional, visual, and social history, all that goes with it. And so notice what you see and enjoy. We're going to look at images and we'll get briefly acquainted with the library's digital commons online archive. And so we're going to dive in, and I have a lot of slides to get through and I want to leave time for your questions. Here's a view of Monument Square, Congress Square, as you'll recognize. This is 1961. I hope you can see my cursor here. I'm pointing to Congress Square. I'm kind of circling it here. I hope you're able to see that. This is in 61, and these are almost like maps. And we're going to look at how we can use footprint atlases that I've digitized. We'll look at that later. This is Woodford's Corner. You might recognize that. This is in the 1950s, and this is looking in a sort of a northwesterly direction or a northerly direction. You have Forest Avenue on the right side. And I just wanted you to see that to set the stage, because when you look at these street patterns, it helps us to comprehend how we had trolley cars, a whole system of this, and how they negotiated these intersections. This is quite a complex configuration, I guess we could say, for Woodford's Corner. But on we go. This is going to be a bit of a whirlwind, but I think you'll see many places that you recognize. But suffice it to say, we're looking at a piece of the 18th century. This is Boothby Square, and you'll recognize the Custom House on the left. And we're really looking at 4th Street, a portion of 4th Street. And the Federalist, well, we're getting to that. The 18th century, the latter would be that Federalist era. We're looking at the late 1700s, and you really see it here. I think you'll recognize Park Street in the West End. The Federalist era is, for us, north of here, they would say the Loyalist era. here it's really from about 1785 to about 1820, and you can see the plain facade and how the windows are situated and the doorways. There's a block of this on Park Street in the West End, and that's a nice representation of the Federalist style. Here we have something familiar. This is actually from the archives. This is a view of the Longfellow House on Congress Street. That was built in 1786. And we're looking at something that represents the Georgian style. It's symmetrical. We have the chimneys at the edges, right, the extreme left and right. Some things that tell us that this is Georgian. Georgian is parallel to the Federalist style. It extends, in fact, into the, I'd say, about 1830. This particular photo of the Wadsworth Longfellow House was taken in 1959. Maybe the car kind of tips you off. So that is representative in Portland of that Georgian style. This is, you may recognize for fellow West Enders here, this is the John Neal House at 175 State Street. This was built in 1836 and the facade is granite. The photo was taken in 1965. See the Corvair there in the foreground. And the dormers there at the top, you know, they're telling us something about what we would refer to as the Grecian revival. There are many examples of this in Portland, like this. You might recognize the Mariners Church building on 4th Street. This was a hard picture to take. I actually had to back up into Market Street to take this picture. This was built in 1828. And here you have the Grecian revival with the archways. That gives us a hint of this. Look at that window here in this section. It's granite. It's actually quite an impressive building, and it survived the Great Fire of 1866. Moving along and back again in the West End, we have a block of houses. This is on Pine Street. It's the J.B. Brown block. On Pine Street, built in 1865 and 1866, and we're looking at a mixture of things here. We have what's called Italianate, not terribly ornamental, but we're seeing some of it here in these bay windows. And I'll also point out that the porticos here were added later, and that is really that colonial revival. And remember, we're in that middle, just after the middle of the 19th century. You know, when we talk about the Victorian period, you know, Queen Victoria was around a long time. And so it represents really the latter, you could certainly say the latter 2/3 of the 19th century, but there are some distinct styles that are within that. So when you look at these, you know, think of when you might be out for a walk and you look at this row of houses, notice the roof here. That's a very Italianate looking thing, but also the porticos added later, the windows. Notice something about the ornamentation in these bay windows, and we will move on to what we call the colonial revival. There's a lot of this around the Western Prom, and this is a John Calvin Stevens design. This is on Bowdoin Street, and the colonial revival was popular here, I would say circa 1880 to about 1910, made to look in the colonial style, but certainly built around the turn of the 20th century. Stevens built a lot of things that are like this. Think of how you know Bowdoin Street and other parts of the city. Another great example of this is actually in Saco. The Saco Museum was designed by him, and it is in that colonial revival style. I wanted you to see a detail of the front door of the house on Bowdoin Street that's here, and notice the glass around the door and these patterns and the ornamentation of this. And it really is this revival of a much older style, this colonial revival. This is another Stevens design. This is from the archives, and it is it's a large home on the Western Prom. And I wanted you to see a Queen Anne style. And when we talk about the Queen Anne style, notice some things here, like the overhanging eaves. This is a very Queen Anne touch. The turret there on the right, and that it's a very asymmetrical design. Stevens built this shingle style, and again, it is bringing back an older style. But when you see something that has some of these traits, it's telling you that you're looking at a Queen Anne style house or building. Here's another. I took this one on Pine Street and Emery Street, and that certainly fits the bill. The eaves, the asymmetry, this kind of, not quite a turret, but it is there. It is there, and it's not dead center. So that's giving you some hints about the style. Even next door there on the left is very interesting as well, and it is attesting to the times that these things were built. Again, the Queen Anne style is about 1880 to the early 1900s. Mecca alumni will recognize this, and we have a great example here of the Grecian Revival style. This is the Clap House, and this was built in 1832. And the Greek Revival, late 18th, early 19th century. You can see why it's called Grecian Revival. You have these columns of the Ionic style, and it has this look of a kind of a Grecian temple. There are a number of these of buildings or houses that look like this. Think of State Street. You'll see a lot of this. And another tip off for you is, even if you see heavy columns or heavy verticals at the corners of some of the wooden houses, you see this on Munjoy Hill as well, and that's telling you that it's part of that Grecian Revival. Some things are more ornamented, some are less, but this is giving you a great example of that style. This is on Spring Street. This is 97 Spring Street. Here we're back on State Street. This is called the Henry Fox House. This is at 125 State Street, 1869. We would look at this as Italianate as well. If you look at the roof, I wanted you to get a good look at that. We're almost under it where you can see that. We would say it's Victorian Italianate, the pedimented windows and doors, the projecting eaves, and the cupola. Well, yeah, not quite. We can't quite get this here, but that is one of those traits of this style. And of course, we have some Grecian-looking columns there in the front, this Corinthian style. Again, this is built in 1869. This is on Neal Street, and again, we have that Grecian Revival, though this is built much later. This was built in 1909. This is in the West End on Neal Street. But again, notice the roof has some of those Italianate touches, but then you have the columns in the front. A really great example of these styles. As you observe, you can take some great walks in that neighborhood and start to notice things now that you are in the know and you're observers of architecture, local architecture. Here's an old favorite for many, and this is from the archives. This was taken in the 1930s. Here you have an Italianate villa. It's the Victoria Mansion. It is at 109 Danforth Street. It is a great place to visit to really look at the interior as well. Here we're seeing all those indicators that tell us about that Italianate style, but a lot of things mixed in, the columns, right? This portico. Look at those eaves and the windows. There is so much going on with the Victoria Mansion, and again, very well worth seeing the interior too. Look at that car too in the foreground. All right, moving on here. I think we're doing pretty well. This was the home of Francis Fassett, architect, parallel and counterpart of John Calvin Stevens. He designed this for himself. This is on Pine Street, and we would call this high Victorian Gothic. Not an easy house to photograph either. I was pretty well up the street getting this because I wanted you to see everything. There's a lot going on. The roof, the entrance as well. Some of it is even reminiscent of that Second Empire style. But then again, this is 1876. And this is the Facet House, architect of a lot of things in Portland. If you think of the Rhines Department Store, the Baxter Building, the Old Portland Public Library, which we'll also see, he designed that, designed many things in Portland. And here we're in the Old Port. You might recognize this. I took this. Also, it is the corner of Exchange and Middle Street, the First National Bank building at 57 Exchange Street. This was built in 1883. And now that you know something about the Queen Anne style, here you're looking at a commercial building, right? An office building. It's a bank. It was built to be a bank, but it isn't the Queen Anne style. You have that tower. It used to be a clock tower, and I will show you a picture of what that looked like. But then again, the windows, the arches that are around on that high first floor. This is granite and brick. It's really quite an impressive building. Here's what it looked like in the 1930s. I wanted you to see the clock tower. So you would not see that today, but you would see this today. But I thought, here's a chance for you to say, I know what used to be there. And archivists, wow, we do this all the time. And I don't want to impress this too much on you. And then on the left is the old post office. You see a little evidence of that in granite. But here's what it looks like today. And here I got a little bit closer. And I always recommend doing that. If you really want to, and if you have the ability, you have the flexibility to study something, get closer, look at those details, the glass, the entrance, all of this decoration and the masonry. It is really of the period. And as some of you know, or many of you know, the city of Portland, especially this area where the bank is, suffered a devastating fire in 1866. And so the rebuilding of that district and a lot of downtown Portland was of this style. So we get to have a lot of Victorian designs, you know, right in the center of town like this, because this is 1883. And here we're back in the West End again on State Street. This is the State Street Church. And I should mention, actually, before I forget, that because we're looking at styles and just examples of things, just to get you sensitized and to encourage you to look more and look closer and to make those inquiries, those visual inquiries, we could do a study of religious architecture or the architecture of schools, or we could take things in genres by their functions. But what I really wanted to do in just a short amount of time was to show you these styles so that you probably have passed this a zillion times on your way to the bridge, perhaps. And I will also say that the facade, the part of the front of this church was, because this was built in 1851, and we would call this Gothic Revival, but it was added to, and John Calvin Stevens did that work. Here we're a little further in the West End. This is the corner of, this is actually Vaughan Street near Bowdoin Street. And this is called the Goodwin House, and 1869, more Gothic Revival. I wanted you to get some good examples of that. There's a great house also on Arlington Street near Woodford's Corner that has this style. If you are able to see, I don't know if you can see my arrow. I am circling around the right-hand side of the image with the house. You would see designs like this on Arlington Street, and then here on Spring Street. I took this one. This is the John J. Brown house at 387 Spring Street, and it was actually moved to this spot. This was built in 1845, and excuse me, this represents that Gothic revival. Once again, how do we know it's Gothic revival? Well, we have some things that make us think of cathedrals, right? Gothic churches. Look at those windows above the door, the design of that portico, the roof. I sometimes say that the peaks of those roofs sometimes look like a pair of scissors, and that tells us it's Gothic revival. So you will have that in your arsenal when you show people around, and they'll say, "Wow, how do you know all of this stuff?" So there you have it. Here we get to see what is called the Second Empire, which has to do with Napoleon III and the Second Empire. This is 1867. You have a mansard roof, and that helps to tip it off, as well as the bay windows. This is Deering Street in the West End, 11 and 13 Deering. This is called the Ross and Lord houses. And there's an interesting asymmetry here, and I'm going to assume that the bay windows on the right are original, especially on the second floor. But really, the slate roof with the dormers, with those windows popping out like that, it allows someone to stand up in the attic, and that becomes a credible third floor. There's your mansard roof. Now going 2 doors to the west from this, you have some details from the Woodman block, also built in 1867, also that Second Empire style. This is 19 and 21 Deering Street, also known as the Woodman block. And this is carved. That's carved wood there at the center left, and very much indicative of the time. A lot has been decorated in these houses, these row houses, and they're up and down Deering Street, they're up and down Carlton Street. If you've taken a stroll and we're getting to that weather, you can start to notice these things. Yes, I promised you would see the Baxter Building. This was designed by Francis Fassett, and this is what we would call the Romanesque revival, because it is 1889. And the Romanesque period is a lot longer ago than that. It was in the Middle Ages. But notice the kind of checkerboard look on the left and right, the archways, the archway to walk in, and then above those first floor windows, and certainly you can see them dead center on the second floor. It has the look of a Romanesque church, but this was built to be the public library. This is the old Portland Public Library, 619 Congress Street, designed by Francis Fassett. You can get this view when you're on the second floor of the building across the street. So here's this, and so you have a great example of the Romanesque revival. A lot of this in Boston as well. This one is fun because there is so much going on here. This is like a kitchen sink, but we're going to have fun with this. This is called the John J. Frost block, and you've got the bones of this, I guess you could say, is 1845, and this is Spring Street at Park Street. We're seeing a lot of different motifs of the 19th century. The protruding storefront is certainly later, but the bay windows and all the way on the right, all the way on the left are very different styles, but it is one block. And certainly when we look at these buildings and these homes, we know that things have been added and things have been changed. Not many things are left exactly as they were, right, when they were first built. And we have to just acknowledge that that does happen, but we have a lot of original things here, especially at the extremities of this block. Fair is fair. We're talking about Portland and Portland architecture, and I wanted you to have some triple deckers, some real parkside triple deckers. So I took a walk on Grant Street, and I got this one, so you can see, and you can have fun playing the little visual game that I was doing. Are the porches in the front or are the porches in the back? Here they're in the front. This is Grant Street. These were built circa, we'll have to say, about 1910, between about 1900 and 1910. Many things have been changed, like the siding and so on, but the basic structure is there. And then here it's porches in the back, not in the front. And this is on Sherman Street. And we're seeing again a design from the turn of the century. This is in Parkside. Many apartment houses that are like this, and they're all built close to that time period, close to Deering Oaks. So I wanted you to have that because this is a very distinct part of the architectural landscape in Portland. See the porches in the front and in the back. Sometimes none. Sometimes they're on the side. But I'll let you join that game as you like. And from there, we're back here on Congress Street, very close to the library. This is called the Fidelity Trust Bank Building, 467 Congress. And now we're moving into the 20th century. This is called the arts and crafts, or you could say Beaux-Arts style. A lot of decoration. If you get close to this, you can really see this. But look at that level that is above the lobby. I guess it would be the mezzanine level. A lot of decoration, very filigreed. We have a lot of this in buildings like this. And the bank building is a great example of the style. There's a little bit of it in Portland, and here's one. I picked a few designs as we move through this of Frederick Thompson. He built a lot of things in Portland, and this is from the archives. And I'll show you something about finding what I found, and I've already, because I'm in the process of curating a large collection of Gannett negatives, how I'm compiling these things, because you could run searches on your own to find the other Frederick Thompson designs. But I put this one up because it's a great example of what he built. It's the Walker Manual Training School. It's Casco Street in Bayside, built in 1901. This photo was taken in 1960. So you have the corner of Casco Street and Cumberland Avenue. And something about Thompson's designs are those arches. Notice those round arches above each window, and then the door frame. And that door frame is something you see in a lot of his other designs. So just tipping you off to that. Here's another of his designs. This is on Munjoy Hill. It's the Emerson School, 13 Emerson Street. He built this in 1898. And this is how it looked in 1979. But, you know, you've got that arch, you know, indicative of how he built columns. It is really a product of that late 19th century. That's another Thompson design. Here's another Thompson design that maybe you didn't know he designed. This is the Deering Oaks Castle. It is still there. It's called a castle because of the way it looks, right? This was built by him in 1894, and this is how it looked in 1974. And what I will do for just a moment so that you can see this, are you able to see the library homepage? You're able to see this? I'm going to go to the...
Abraham, we're actually still seeing
sorry?
your slide.
I'm not?
We're not seeing the library's homepage.
You're not? Okay, so this is not working as it should. Okay. I was going to go to Digital Commons to show you that. I'm not sure how I can, because when we tested it, it worked. Okay, you know what we'll do? We're going to switch this after all the slides, right? We'll go through all the slides first. It looks like it's going to be a little clunkier than when we, of course, when we tested it. But we'll go to that after all the slides. Let's go through all the slides first to make the best of our time. Again, we're in the 20th century. We're moving through this. 1930, this is the Tudor revival. This is called the Burridge House. It's on Chadwick Street. And you're seeing all those Tudor accents there, bringing back that style. I wanted you to see some bungalows because we have a lot of those also. These are two East Deering bungalows, circa 1910, 1920, right around there. You can identify the style by a full first floor and just kind of like a Cape Cod, but even smaller, a sort of loft there with a dormer on the second floor. It's really a one floor, and these are two different bungalows that I went looking for you. And then here we get to have fun with Art Deco. Would you believe this is where Otto's Pizza is now on Congress Street? This is the top of Forest Avenue. I wanted you to see that, and I'm giving you a fair amount of Art Deco because I haven't seen anyone compile this style in Portland. So this is taken in 1940, and it's 566 Congress Street. The building is actually a lot older than 1940. It's just in 1940 this facade was built, the Puritan tea room. And if we were able to jump windows, which seemed to work when we tested this, I would have shown you the menu of the Puritan tea room, because I did find it and I digitized it, and it is on Digital Commons. So suffice it to say, this is a great example of Art Deco that was in Portland. Now, Art Deco, when we say that, we're really saying Art Décoratif, which was coined in about 1925. There was a major exposition in Paris, but the style really began just before 1920. Here's another example of Art Deco. This is in the West End. Art Deco appropriated a lot of Cubism, and there were some influences of Egyptian art. It's a very interesting style. Geometric shapes. Here's a closer view of 46 Pine Street. It's those patterns, those shapes, and you really see it here. I took two pictures and comped them together, so you really get an impression of what Art Deco is. It's that decoration. You have these very graphic arts, very, very geometric kinds of patterns. If you look close on the left-hand side, you'll see bells, for Bell Telephone. This is 55 Forest Avenue. This was built in 1944 when a lot of Art Deco was being built. Here is 551 Congress Street. I think many of you know this. This is at the corner of Oak and Congress. And this is a much older building than even, well, it's about 1929. Just it's been changed and torn down and changed. But when you're looking up, I like to say this when I get school groups here. If you want to see the historic, look up. If you want to see the present day, look down. And this is a great example of that. If you look up, you're seeing Art Deco, lots of it. And then the angel is in the right photo is around the corner on the Oak Street side of this building. This is called the Lerner Shoe Block. And as I said, it's 1929, replaced a 1907 structure. And it's at the corner of Congress and Oak. More Art Deco. You know this. This is the State Theater on Congress Square, 609 Congress Street, built in 1929. What tells us this is Art Deco? Well, not so much on the outside, but certainly the movie theater inside, the accents inside as well, the elevator. There's a lot of trim that tells us it's Art Deco. There's some of the symmetry and the patterning, not quite like the phone company, but nonetheless, it is still Art Deco, and it was built in 1929. The Eastland Hotel is across High Street from this, and that would also be a pretty good example. It's just been changed so much over the years. And speaking of Art Deco, this is 540 Congress Street. You might recognize Rennie's. This was built to be a Woolworth, and it was Woolworth for a long time, built in 1946. But look at the patterning. It's almost like a margin above that first floor. I got a little closer so you could see that. Look above that window. That's a little like that phone company, and along the roof, way up at the top, and then also way at the bottom, this margin. 1946, really good example of local Art Deco. Okay, we have just a few left, so we're doing quite well. Moving again into the 20th century, these are two developments built in the early 1940s. These two developments are both in the Eastern Prom area on Munjoy Hill. They're two, you have MacArthur Gardens on the top and the Eastern Prom Apartments on the bottom. And these were built to help solve a housing shortage in Portland. The top development was built in 1942 and the bottom in 1943. And it was a way to have a lot of housing in a small proximity. So those are examples of, and you can see they're bringing back older motifs, but in the 1940s. And it may be an attempt to reassure people. Who knows? But here it is, and it's still here. This is later. This is about 1970. This is on Pine Street, the Promenade House. And we're starting to look a little postmodern because we have a mixture of styles and forms, which is typical of postmodern. And but those small windows might be telling us something about the energy crisis. That's been my guess about this building, but it's about 1970, and it is in the West End. You know what this is. Here is the Portland Public Library, the current. When it was built, it was the big parade in 1979. But the style is what we would call minimalist. Some people say brutalist, but I must tell you that that's a pun, because when Le Corbusier, the architect, when he said béton brut, he was really saying, let's build with raw concrete. But for us that speak English, when we say brutalist, we think, oh, this is brute, this is brutal. But it really means building with cement. Think of the current Boston City Hall, right? Building with cement. It was a popular style, and here's an example. The Reiki School is another before they took the ramps down. But that would be another example of that style of that time. This is 1978, 79. Doesn't look like this now. Here I wanted you to see modernism. We got a great example across the square. It's One City Center, built in 1985. And when we say modernism, we're really saying, not entirely, but you could say it's a movement that's clearly a movement that really departs from classical motifs. And it's recessed. And the hope, I think, for a design like this is to pull pedestrians in. And with the postmodern, it's kind of coming out at the sidewalk. Here it's recessed, an example of modernism. It doesn't really have much to do with what's next to it. Again, that's another trait, I guess you could say, with modernism. And now we move to some new designs. We would call this postmodern because, again, this is engaging the sidewalk a little bit more. This is the Linden on Marginal Way, built in 2013. And the postmodern is really the reaction against modernism, using just a little bit of ornamentation, and we're seeing it on the right above that doorway. I had a fun conversation with my mother about what do we call this? What is this called? So we both researched this, and here's an example on Fox Street. What is this called? Porches on the back. And we found an article, and there are some nicknames for this. Some say developer modern, some call it McUrbanism, some call this fast casual, because they can build these things quickly and will accommodate a lot of people. Also being, postmodern, you have some poetry there in the wrought iron in that fence. So this is being a little bit more engaging with the neighborhood and the street. Here's another, this is on Congress Street, porches on the, I guess it's the front and the back. We read another, let's see, LOMO for low modern. Somebody calls this, because it's a contemporary style, and so not all has been said and done yet, but we got a kick out of sponge build square parts. We thought that was pretty funny, looking at these. But we've yet to see what happens next. But in this example, we're really seeing an attempt to match up with the buildings that are near this. And so that is telling us that this is really postmodern and not modernism. And here's what the library looks like now. I took this in 2015, and suddenly the library that had that modernist, minimalist design is starting to look more postmodern. Simply by the changes that were made in 2010. So I wanted you to see that. Suddenly we have this example, and also how it's lining up with the building that's on the left. That again is the bank, the Fidelity Trust. We're at the end here, and I wanted to talk about how architectural styles are really part of general design movements, and that cathedral radio in 1947 is Art Deco. I don't know if the cat is Art Deco, and his shoes shouldn't be on that hassock, but we won't go there. But I wanted you to see just the decorative arts and how that parallels, and the cars we saw in some of these pictures, how that works with and runs parallel to architectural styles. I wanted you to see this because this is one of the treasures of Portland Public Library. This is John Calvin Stevens' book, and I photographed the title page, and it was given to the library by a member of the Stevens family and the architectural firm. And the sketch below is a house that, this is one of those Western promenade area houses built by Stevens. And the last one I'll show you is this, because I want to encourage you to take pictures. Please take pictures. And then it adds to this whole citywide corpus of analysis and observation. I took this in 1991 with a 5x7 camera, so the photo looks older than it really is. And if you look close, I'm going to do this. I don't know if you're able to see me enlarge this. There's a model of Union Station right in the window. This is Lucusi's Quick Lunch on Lower Congress Street. The Hong Kong market is there now, but I took this in 1991. And that's all our slides. I don't know, Sarah, am I able to go to Digital Commons from here?
Yeah, can you toggle to a different screen view?
It's funny, it worked perfectly when we did it last. What if I do this? Now are you seeing it? Oops, screen sharing has stopped.
Now we're seeing you, but you share your screen again for the library's website.
Oh yeah, I got it. Okay. Here. Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Brilliant.
And we do have a few questions in the chat that I want to say.
All right. I'll do this very, very quickly. And I've got this annoying band across the center. So I'm going to pull this so I got to pull this further. Here's this. So there's the home page. Digital resources. So this is the Portland Rooms homepage, but there's a drop down for Digital Commons. I'd like you to see that. Are you seeing Digital Commons right now?
Yes, we are.
You are, perfect, brilliant, wonderful. I want you to see, first of all, one of the footprint atlases, because I want you to know that you can go to this. I made this table of contents, and if you click on this and you see one of the mats, let it manifest with this frame. Do you see what I'm circling here? Are you able to see this, Sarah? I'm circling this with an arrow. Great. When you do this, and you can slide this, I digitize an atlas that's out of copyright. This is 1914. We call this a footprint atlas. And that really helps a lot when I have to identify these images. So now you're seeing that. The next thing I want you to see is, if I can get to this quick enough, I wanted you to see how you can retrieve on, for example, Frederick Thompson's designs. The negatives collection from the Gannett era is here, and you see the search box here. If we type in Frederick, and Thompson is spelled without the H, I have to tell you that. That's why I picked him. But if you run this search, you're going to see, oops, it's very literal. There's a K at the end of that. Okay, here are all kinds of designs of his. I really wanted you to see this. For example, here's the Expo. He designed that too. See the arch, see the facade, and you can also aggrandize these things and make them easier to look at. But that's also a Thompson design. There's this, makes you think a little bit of the Walker Manual Training School. And then the last thing I wanted to show you, are you able to see this? Do you see the menu, Sarah?
I don't see a menu, no.
Okay, all right. Well, then I better quit while I'm ahead. Okay. But one of the collections is restaurant menus, and I put that together during the lockdown. So I'm going to do the stop share, and I think we did pretty well. You have some questions?
Yes. let's see. A Harding is wondering if, well, it might be a little late for this, but if you could explain the characteristics of each style mentioned, but I think you kind of did a pretty good job of that.
I tried to in a
Yeah.
in a short time. Were there specifics?
Well, and then I don't know if A Harding is still here and wants to comment. But we do, in the meantime, we do have another question from Jeffrey, who was, it's about the First National Bank building, and Jeffrey is wondering if that is also by Facet.
No, it is not. It was a Boston firm, and I can, if whoever asked the question can send an email, I can respond to that. But it was done by an architectural firm. I think it was two names. They were a firm in Boston, and they built that bank building. But yeah, it has. That's a very good observation. It has a lot of the look of Facet.
Yeah, he specifically mentioned the red decorative panels.
Yeah. Oh yeah, using that red stone and so on. Very much of the style. Very much of the time.
Great. And then we have a question from Susan, who is wondering why the clock tower was removed from the First National Bank. Destroyed fire?
No, that's a post-fire structure, but it could have been a storm. It's hard to tell. I don't know if there's a way to find that out. That would take some research. We may have the wherewithal in the Portland room to find that out. But yeah, there was once a clock tower, and when you see that picture from, I think it's 1939, it actually looks really good with that clock. Let me see if I can find the bank building, built in 1883. Yeah, it could have been something like a storm that took that down. It's a very old building. And you can see that work was done on that roof to try to make it look smooth, make it not look like something important is missing.
And then let's see, I guess this is more of a comment from Annie, who would like to point out that some of the buildings on Grant Street have porches in the front and the back.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Are they in the front? Are they in the back? Yeah. Have fun with that. Yeah, I was walking around with my camera, and yes, that is true. And you also saw that at the corner of Congress and St. Lawrence Street, porches in the front and the back. Yes, that
Abraham,
is. Yeah.
Some people are asking for your email. Do you mind if I share that in the chat?
That's fine. And the Portland room email address is the best to use.
Okay.
It's great for questions and. There's a lot to this, and we packed a lot into 45 very fast minutes. Yeah, absolutely.
I think maybe we should probably just schedule a part 2 for this talk.
All right. We could. You mean I have to make more photographs?
And we'll make sure our technology is better next time. So
Yeah. We should look at this toggling of windows. That would have been nice to jump from one thing to another. But this is often what I do with patrons. This was a very full day, and there was an architectural historian here this morning who was watching me prep this. And in a lot of ways, for a rare books room, this is really quite a living room. As you know, as anyone that is in this group, I see a few lovely faces here. That this is something of a living room for a rare books room, and yeah, we are always welcoming inquiries and now you're observers.
Abraham, I'm seeing a lot of yeses to a part 2, so we'll have to talk.
Uh-oh.
But it is just about 7 before we wrap this up. Does anyone have any other questions for Abraham? I'm seeing a lot of thank yous. This was wonderful.
Yeah, I don't see any of this, but I take your word for it, and you're all welcome.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Again, we'll connect on a part 2 and see if we can bring more of Portland's architecture to you.
Yeah, or we could do something with genre, because a major part of this is purpose. for those of us that like art history, they're all connected. We're looking at graphic arts, we're looking at the built structure, etc. So yeah, absolutely. But thanks everyone.